So, a lot of people think the reason they're not advancing in their career, leadership, or in life is because of lack of opportunity, lack of experience, or even lack of recognition. But often that is not the real issue. There are these things called invisible ceilings, internal limits, patterns, and beliefs that quietly hold people back from stepping into leadership. And the problem is, most people don't even know that they're there. And so today we're talking about how to identify those invisible ceilings and how to break through them. So, Rich Ashton is here. He's a leadership development expert and founder of Growing Your Own, where he helps organizations and individuals develop leaders from within by focusing on growth mindset and unlocking potential. And what I love about the work is that it's not just about leadership skills, it's about helping people become the kind of person who can actually step into leadership. So, Rich, it's so great to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I love talking about this subject.
Yeah, it's your wheelhouse, right?
It
I love this
really is.
topic. So many people are branching out in the world right now and taking these leadership roles, and other people are kind of hiding in the shadows because they don't see their potential. So when you talk about invisible ceilings, what does that mean? And what are you seeing in people that's holding them back?
It probably helps to understand that the majority of employees that I have had in my small companies are blue collar employees. And so they likely have never thought of themselves as a leader. They've been led, but some people model the behavior that is shown to them, but a lot of people just take that as reality and are happy to be led, never thinking about moving into the role of leadership. So when we have had success training people, the very first thing we do is talk with them one on one and determine what it is that has kept them from moving into leadership. And of course, we're only talking to people who have demonstrated an interest in it, but in most cases don't even know what the difference between a leader and a non-leader is. And so, maybe you have been told all your life that, you're less than. Maybe you just never thought of yourself as a leader. Maybe you felt like as a technician or an installer, that was as good as it was going to get. In my case, I was raised by a very strong father who made me fear failure so severely that it made me overly cautious. And when I did copy his leadership style, it was such an authoritarian style that it didn't work and had to be changed. So life has a way of teaching us what we can't do more than it does what we can do. And
Mhm.
so whatever that ceiling is for you is what we deal with. And it seems to be, I mean, there are different categories, but it seems to be real different for each individual.
Yeah, definitely the outside, like everything, like you said, how we were raised. Is that what an invisible ceiling is? So it's these outside factors that are contributing to how we see ourselves in a role, and and it's essentially the way that we think about ourselves. Is that how you would define it?
Yeah, I think that's real close. So a lot of it is emotional. A lot of people come into the adult world or the business world, and they've kind of been taught, whether they've been bullied or teased or whatever, they've they don't have a great self-image. And so that's one of them. And we've trained a lot of people who suffered from image problems, and they just they didn't feel very good about themselves as a human being, much less think that they had any leadership capabilities. And that's a hard one to get through. But yeah, life has a way of beating us up pretty badly.
Totally. So why don't people recognize these ceilings in themselves?
Well, I guess because it's who we are. If you've created that image over a period of 15 or 20 years, that's not who you see yourself, or that's not what you recognize in yourself. Other people recognize it, but you probably don't recognize it. And in some cases, it's too painful to recognize.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we can all relate to those instances where we see something in someone else that they don't see in themselves. And
Yeah.
I often find myself wondering, man, if only they saw what I see, you know?
I do that a lot. In my own case, I was raised to believe that it was kind of us against them, and that the world kind of was out to take advantage of you. And so it was hard for me to trust that people liked me, respected me, wanted to follow me, because that was not part of my upbringing. And I brought that into the business world, and I still suffer from some of that. It's kind of, those become your default behaviors. So even though you overcome them to some degree, under stress, you tend to revert to those kinds of beliefs and behaviors. So I mean, that's just one of them, but it was a very strong sense for me that sooner or later the person that I was dealing with was going to try to take advantage of me. And that's a horrible way to go through life.
Yeah. And I think for me it was that I was showing that I had to work my butt off and I had to push through no matter what, no matter how hard it was, no matter the situation. Working hard was the way I was going to get to where I needed to be. And if I was in an environment that wasn't healthy, it didn't matter. I had to push through. And so for me, it was accepting this way of being treated, even if I wasn't being treated well. And so I got to see the real ugly side of some of the corporate world because of that. And then that slowly just, it made me real strong. But I mean, for a while, my confidence was just on the ground because I
Mhm.
didn't believe in myself because I was pushing myself through into these environments that weren't good for me because I was told I had to work hard in order to make a living and make money and be successful. So yeah, it can show up different for everybody.
Yeah, and I think particularly in the case of a woman in industry, I think it's just that much tougher. I think you face things that I have never faced.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk more a little about how these invisible ceilings affect people who are stepping into those leadership roles.
I use a couple of examples because they really illustrate this. So one of them is a lady who came to us as a dispatcher several years ago, and she was an okay employee, but she was very closed off. And I to this day don't know 100% of why she was so closed off, but I'm a very interactive kind of a boss, and so if people are in the office, I'm going to talk to them, interact with them, and I make it a point to have a different point of contact with each employee. And so as I would go around the company, I'd just get very little out of her. And she did her job, but she did no more than her job. And she was not only closed off to me, she was closed off to all of the people that she worked with. And it took a year before I had a breakthrough with her, and it was over something kind of silly. It had to do with her son and being on the football field and the referee uh, calling a penalty on her son, and she didn't think that was right. And she was telling me that story on a Monday morning, and well, I had similar stories to share with her, and that was the day that we kind of broke through. So whatever that unlocked in her, it made her feel much more comfortable, not only with me but with the other employees. And over a period of months, as she got rid of her limitations and began to interact with people and show just how bright she is and how talented she was and how great she was at customer service, she actually put herself in line for a promotion and is now in a supervisory role over several other dispatchers. Had we not had that breakthrough, had she not had that breakthrough, I don't know that she would ever have been capable of moving into that role. Um, so something in her background made her closed off, and for whatever reason, when she got through that, it just opened her up on a variety of fronts, and we got to see the shining star that she really was under that protective layer.
Yeah, I guess this is why a lot of high potential people sometimes stay overlooked, right? If it wasn't for your recognition of this inconsistency and her being closed off and like constant, like continuously trying to break through that, I'm sure she would have stayed overlooked, and many people do. What do you think it was about that day? Was it the conversation? Was it the connection? Was it a little bit of A, a little bit of B?
Yeah, I wish I knew exactly what it was, and I'm not even sure she could tell you what it was. But there's always a dynamic between an owner and employee where
Hmm.
you don't know what kind of owners they have worked for in the past. But she came into the company not expecting to have any kind of a personal relationship with the owner of the company. If I had to guess, I'd say that had as much to do with it as anything. But that doesn't explain being closed off with the other employees around her. Um,
Hmm.
she's just somebody that didn't open up very quickly. And I'm sure that I know just the tip of the iceberg, but it was enough to unlock the real talent that was underneath.
Hmm. What a beautiful thing to see. So, what are the common patterns or behaviors that signal that someone is hitting a ceiling?
Well, I would say that almost everybody is at a ceiling of one type or another. I think the importance is that you sit down one-on-one and talk to them about why they reacted this way to a certain situation or why they reacted that way. And it doesn't take very long with that kind of questioning before you understand what battles they're facing. And for everybody, it's different. We had a terrific 10-year employee who rose kind of uh, a supervisor role, but for as bright as he was, he never tapped into his intelligence. He just kind of did things because he'd seen other people do them. And
Mhm.
once we began to have that conversation with him and gave him confidence that he was smarter than he was giving himself credit for, and he did have the ability to think critically, it really opened things up. And when he was taught that he had the responsibility, which wasn't a burden, it was an opportunity. It opened up some creativity in him that I'm not even sure he knew was there. But it was fun to watch, and he became a much better supervisor and ultimately manager as a result of just tapping into talent that was there underneath the surface that nobody had told him he had.
Right. So I know that a lot of these invisible ceilings, as we talked about, come from like our learning, our background. They could be cultural.
Mhm.
But how much of this comes down to mindset versus environment?
I, I mean, if I had to guess, the answer to that question is environment. And I'll use another example. A Hispanic employee of ours who came to work for us many years ago, and his only goal was to work for 6 months, earn enough money to travel back to Mexico. And 19 years later, he's a part of our leadership team and one of the more influential people in the company. That was a process that went step by step. He had no thought of ever being a leader. He didn't have leadership was not modeled for him. He had worked for some leaders that weren't terribly good. And as he progressed step by step in the organization, he succeeded at every stop. And he was shocked that we continued to see progress in him and that we can continue to see potential in him. The long and the short of it is that he is now a not only a full-fledged manager, he's a better parent, he's a better husband, and in Hispanic families, they tend to hang with a very large extended family. In his 40s, I mean, he is treated as the patriarch of his extended family. I mean, he's the man in his family. None of that would ever have been possible if he hadn't begun to adopt some leadership principles, and he enthusiastically embraced what he was being taught and then just kept taking these big leaps forward. It was, I mean, that's one of the most gratifying examples that I've been a part of.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I mean mindset, I would agree with you. Mindset plays a role, but if you're in an environment that is uplifting and that is supportive and that like the people around you truly want to see you succeed, then that's going to alter your mindset and that's going to give you that motivation in order to grow and do better because other people see that in you. I think the saying is you're the equivalent of the five people you surround yourself with, right? And so that's such a beautiful thing to see someone kind of just break through that. Um, so when he was, I'll use him as an example, when he was finally recognizing these ceilings, what was the first step to breaking through them? So when someone recognizes that, oh my God, okay, so I have this invisible ceiling and I want to break through it. How do you start?
In his case, we had to teach him just different leadership skills. For instance, I would take him into a meeting with me when I was meeting. He now runs our warehouse, so he dealt with a lot of our vendors. And he had always been a piece of meetings, but he'd never had a leadership role in meetings. So I went into a couple of meetings with him. I conducted the meeting from our end, and he just watched. And then we talked about if that had been his meeting, how would he have handled it? What did he see? What did he wonder about? And we just took it step by step. And, he was terrified even after some of that. He was terrified when it came time for him to run his own meeting, but he did great when he ran his own meeting. And he was so proud. And that was one of the times that he really realized that this leadership thing was for him. He was someone, just because of his upbringing, who never thought he would be talking to someone who had the title of vice president. And so if he was dealing with a vendor and the vendor was a vice president, he was automatically intimidated until he
Right,
figured out that in many cases he knew more about what he was talking about than the vice president did. And
right.
it was, it's a gradual process, but once you build that confidence in people, they're shocked at what they can do. And he was a great
Yeah.
example of that.
Wow. It just sounds like the awareness piece is key. So it's like having the awareness creates an opportunity to change that in somebody or in a situation. Um, so then what would blasting through a ceiling actually look like in practice?
Well, in his case, he blasted through a ceiling where he could walk into that meeting with anybody, regardless of title, knowing that he knew how he wanted the meeting to go, what the outcome was that he was looking for, and it was up to him to control the meeting and get to where he wanted to get. That was a gigantic hurdle for him to overcome. Rather than being, in essence, a fly on the wall and watching the meeting happen, he was actually controlling meetings, and that was a big thing. It was also a big thing for him to understand that he was responsible for a certain level of creativity in his division. In the book I wrote about this process, we talked about him having the opportunity to go and look at an Amazon warehouse. Well, Amazon's one of the most sophisticated distribution companies in the world. And for him to get to go tour an Amazon warehouse and then apply some of those principles to the warehouse that he ran, uh, he was he was reluctant to do it at first. I really had to push him to do it. He was so glad when he did it, and he came back like a kid in a candy shop. And his eyes were big, and he was talking fast, and he couldn't wait to begin implementing some of the ideas that he'd learned from that. That's part of that understanding that you have responsibility for what's under your control. And it isn't a burden, it's an opportunity. And the idea
Mhm.
that as a leader, you can actually set the direction that you're going instead of following somebody else's direction, that's a big one.
Yeah. So I love that. So I guess my next question would be now that he's, doing so much better and has so much more confidence and is in a leadership role, now what? Because you said there's always a ceiling. So is there another ceiling that he needs to reach through or how do we maintain or manage these ceilings to keep growing?
I've been at this for a long time, and I still am fighting my ceilings. So yeah, you don't reach a point where you're finished. In his particular case, he struggles with making a commitment to a timeline and honoring that commitment. It's just not part of how he looks at life. And so when he's given a big project, he struggles. Small projects, he does real well, but he still requires quite a bit of supervision and quite a few prods to stay on track with major projects.
I see, I see. So that there's the work is always there. It never stops.
Well, uh, it hasn't stopped for me, and I've been doing it for 55 years, so I assume it
Right,
isn't going to stop for anybody else.
right. So how can leaders or organizations better support people in identifying and breaking through these ceilings?
Well, I think the word that you used was support. So we believe in empowering employees and we believe in supporting them in the journey as long as they're receptive to it. I think that's an ongoing thing, and I think it starts with employees at any level. And if employees feel supported, they'll surprise you with what they can do. And you may have to teach them what empowerment really looks like. You may have to show them things that they probably can do before they start doing them. But it's a continual program of supporting and teaching and giving feedback, both positive and negative. We're a very supportive organization, and I think we've had success at lots of levels with lots of people because we don't beat people up for their failures. Unless, if failures result from laziness or, failures become repetitive, then you have to deal with that issue. But if people are trying to move forward and they're taking risks and willing to learn and willing to get better, we support them all the way through. And I think they know that. I think they feel that. We talk about that in the hiring interview, and we talk about it daily in the company in one way or the other.
Mhm. So, I want to just ask, so when people break through these ceilings, what changes, not just in their career, but in how they show up? What do you notice?
People like to work in an environment where they are empowered and supported. And there's a great source of pride in an employee who realizes that they are having an impact on the organization. They're not just there to work 8 hours and go home. They're there to make something happen. They're there to make improvements. They're there to help other people, just like we have helped them. I just think that's a really positive environment, positive work culture. And I'll put our work culture up against anybody's.
So, what inspired you to create Growing Your Own? I know you published a book in the same name. Where did that inspiration come from?
It's the reverse of that. I created this leadership training program within the company because I wanted to either sell the company to someone who would retain the existing management team, or I wanted to retire and have them run it. But I realized that I had to train people to become those leaders that could take over if I was gone. As a part of that training program, I began writing a blog every 2 weeks, just in a casual way to kind of get them talking about management and leadership issues. It didn't take hold immediately. It wasn't until the general manager said, I think we need to have them read the blogs together and talk about them openly. And he forced that to happen in management meetings. And once that happened, they began holding themselves and each other accountable for the principles contained in the blogs. After 2 years, I had pretty well exhausted my arsenal of leadership information, and they were about ready to run things. And so I read through, I had 52 blogs. I read through them one weekend and said, I'm going to reorganize these, consolidate them, and publish them as a book. And that's how the book came about. And then the leadership course is a condensed version of what we taught in our company.
Oh, amazing. So talk to us a little bit about how you think that leadership has changed over the years, since you have such a vast experience with it. What do you see changing when it comes to leadership?
Well, I'm not sure on the big scale because my book is written for small businesses, and the I am trying to train people who haven't had a lot of exposure to high level leadership. So the difference in my program is it connects with people who fit that description. The chapters are short. The chapters are 2.5 pages long. They come with examples of the principle in action, and it's very easy and digestible. So if you asked a technician, for instance, to read a John Maxwell book, which is, all of John Maxwell's books are fantastic on leadership. But if you ask my people to read those books, they're not going to read them. And they need to be taught the way they learn. So I don't know that that's different in leadership, but when I began looking for information on how to train small business leaders, I found very little available. And that's why we had to do it ourselves. And then as I did it, I realized what was working and what was not working. And this idea of making it in bite-sized pieces, simple leadership principles that are illustrated and digestible. I've told many people, you can read a chapter in my book illustrating one principle. You can put that in place today, and you can see results from that within 24 hours. And I've said in this interview several times, bite-sized pieces, little morsels. That's the way the people that I train learn, and that's the way they retain information. The book is actually now a desktop reference for all of the employees. They go back and reread chapter 12 because they were having trouble with a certain thing, and they want to be reminded of what's in there. But it's 35 simple, practical, relatable leadership lessons.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think small business employees, large business employees, leaders in all realms, when they're learning, like making small little increments of movement towards growth is normal and natural. And I think if people do a little thing every single day towards growth in some way, that eventually that's going to add up. I think there's this misconception that leaders are born. Maybe there are some that are born, but it's not like you walk into this world with confidence. You have to act and then you get the confidence. So I don't know. I see the world as being a little bit mixed up in those ways because there's misconceptions in what is shown to us, whether it be in the media or high level people. The society makes it seem like they just kind of were born that way. But I don't think that's really the case for many.
Well, I completely agree with you. And one of the things I learned through this process is some of our employees have been around me a long time. And I always assumed that if I modeled good leadership, they would automatically copy what I was doing and incorporate that into their own style. That's the way I did it and I was fortunate to work under some really strong leaders early in my career. But that's not what happened. And I kind of have come to learn that most people don't learn that or don't model behavior that they see. But I'm a big believer in mentors and observation and that stuff. But just like a lot of people are not book learners, there are people who have to be taught in very small increments and with examples. And like we both said now, do it a little bit at a time. There are people who can take high level leadership courses and come away and soar. That's not where most of us live. And so that's certainly not the market that my book is aimed at.
How important is the leader of an organization, in your opinion?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important to be a strong leader. I just think that the influencing of people is your mission, and the better you are at influence, the further your organization could go. And the more you can pass that influence down through the organization, whether it's building a culture or building future leaders, I can't imagine that there is anything more satisfying than building an organization by building people.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can remember a few positions I was in my past where the leadership wasn't the strongest and how that affected me. And I think I'm very self-aware. So I was aware of the changes within myself. Like suddenly I wasn't so motivated and suddenly I was doing the bare minimum to get by because the leaders in that organization, I was questioning their integrity because they weren't doing what they were saying they're going to do. And they weren't mirroring the behaviors that they were expecting us in us. And I feel like that really affected me and it changed my whole entire motivation for being there.
Oh, I completely agree. And in the book, we talk about proactive versus reactive managers. And proactive managers actually make things happen, and reactive managers, kind of wait for things to happen to them. And it sounds like you were probably working for that kind of a manager. Um,
Mm.
one thing about it, it doesn't matter where your leadership weakness is. The people who work for you know exactly. Whether you know it or
Mhm.
not is not so important. They know it. They all know. They all know if you're a procrastinator. They all know if you lack integrity. They all know if you're reactive instead of proactive. They know if you make emotional decisions. They know if you're not accountable. So it's important to be all of those things if you're going to be a strong leader.
So lastly, I guess what do you think some of the struggles are with a new leader who is kind of branching out? And so what I mean by that is when someone is learning how to become a leader and maybe they are now in a new role where it's a higher leadership position, what do you see some of the biggest struggles are with those situations?
I think the hardest move of all is to move from being one of the employees to then all of a sudden being a superior to those employees, to your friends, to your peers. That's the hardest transition of all. And frequently, I hear someone in that position say, "They just won't follow me." And
Mhm.
my answer is that's a you problem. They've been following somebody. You need to be the leader that they look up to. And so we talk about what they're doing, where they're running up against roadblocks. Some of them can overcome that, some of them can't. And you find out sometimes that you promote somebody who just really doesn't want to hold themselves accountable for all of these practices. And you have to go backwards then. You can't tolerate the poor leadership if you're going to move your organization forward. And I hate that. I hate going backwards. I hate telling an employee that they just are not progressing at the appropriate level. But you can't build an organization if you're not willing to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rich, thank you so much for being here today. Do you have any last minute thoughts on the topic today that maybe we didn't cover yet?
The only thing I can think of that I didn't mention is the pursuit of knowledge. I call it intellectual curiosity. And that's one of the things that holds leaders back as they move through their leadership progression. I was lucky a long time ago to have somebody recommend that I really pursue intellectual curiosity actively. I read or listen to podcasts or audiobooks an hour and a half every day and have for the last 50 plus years. It's made all the difference in the world. And I can't emphasize that enough. The earlier you start, the better off you'll be, but not just on business, not just on leadership or customer service. The, the more you know, the more influential you are. And the role of a leader is to influence people. So it's
Hmm.
pretty self-explanatory.
Absolutely. So tell us more about the work that you do.
Um, I, I I both promote the book and then conduct an in-person training course, which is a short version of what I taught to our employees. I don't do that remotely. I do it in person, go to companies and work with groups of 10 or less. It's tremendously rewarding. I'm retired now from active participation in the company, so I have that opportunity, and I'm having a ball in my new retirement.
Amazing. Remind us where you're located.
The website is growingyourown.net, not .com, but .net. I love to visit with people individually. If you want to email me, my email address is rich@growingyourown.net. And I'm on
Amazing.
LinkedIn, but I don't do much social media beyond LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here today and for talking about the invisible ceilings. And I know you're going to be joining us for a series. So we have so much more topics to cover under this, and I'm really excited to go deeper on these subjects.
Thanks, Lisa. I enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in and for listening. If you've been feeling stuck, like you're capable of more, but you're not quite getting there, then this episode is your reminder. that the barrier might not be outside of you. So it might be something that you just haven't seen yet. And once you see it, then you can start changing it. So a big thank you to Rich for this amazing conversation, and his work around developing leaders from within is something so many people and so many organizations really need right now. So if you want to learn more about Rich and his work with growing your own, we'll make sure to have links in the show notes for you to have access to that. And so, question for yourself: what is one area in your life where you feel like you've hit a ceiling? Like we talked about earlier, awareness is the first step, and then comes the change. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everyone.